Hi there, welcome to Microsoft Azure Training Series. My name is Neeraj Kumar. I'm a cloud evangelist and enterprise architect, and I will be your instructor for this course. Before we start with this specific tips and tricks session, I assume that you already have beginner to intermediate knowledge of the Azure platform, and you also have knowledge on Azure administration. Azure Files offer fully managed file shares in the cloud using the SMB protocol, which is the server message block, right? Azure file shares can be mounted concurrently by cloud or on-premises deployments of Windows, Linux, and Mac operating systems. Additionally, what you can do is Azure file shares can also be cached on a Windows server with the Azure File Sync for fast access near where the data is being used. So those are different ways actually. And in this tips and tricks session, my objective will be to show you how you can quickly set up an Azure file share and mount it as a drive on your system. There are multiple ways to do it. One is using the SMB protocol where you need to open the port 445. But if you have restrictions, what you need to do is you can use the Point-to-Site VPN where there is no need to open port 445 for the SMB protocol. And also, if someone needs to access from outside the company network, then they need to connect via the Point-to-Site VPN to your corporate network and then access the storage account to upload their files or applications or any other data or the documents, whatsoever they wish for. Okay, so our objective is to set up the Point-to-Site VPN first and then map the storage account on your local machine for easy access. First thing what we are going to cover is we need to understand what actually is the Azure file share. Second, we will see why Azure files are useful, and we also will try to understand what are the key benefits of using the Azure file share. And finally, we are going to have a demo where we are going to configure the Point-to-Site VPN for mounting Azure file share as a drive. Let us now understand why Azure files is useful. So Azure file shares can be used to replace or supplement on-premises file servers. Azure files can be used to completely replace or supplement traditional on-premises file servers or the NAS devices. You can use any operating system like Windows or the Mac operating systems or even the Linux. They can directly mount Azure file shares wherever they want. So first thing is that. Second is Azure file shares can also be replicated, as I already told you, with the Azure File Sync. So you can install it on the Windows machine and you can keep it near to where the data is actually residing for quicker file sync between them, and then you can sync it up with the cloud storage. And then Azure file shares can continue to work with the Active Directory hosted on-premises for access control. The second one is the lift and shift applications. So Azure file shares makes it very easy to lift and shift the applications to the cloud and expect a file share to store the user data. Azure file shares enables both the classic lift and shift scenario where both the application and its data are moved into the Azure, and the hybrid lift and shift scenario where the application data is moved to Azure files and the application continues to run the on-premises. The third thing is you can simplify the cloud development. Azure files can also be used in numerous ways to simplify the application development on cloud. For example, you can share the application settings. A common pattern for distributed application is to have the configuration files in a centralized location where they can be accessed from many application instances, and those application instances load their configuration through the file REST APIs. Okay. The second one is the diagnostic share. An Azure file share that is a convenient place for the cloud applications to write their logs or metrics and even the other error or the crash dumps. And these logs can be written by the application instances via the file REST API. And what developers can do, they can mount the file share on their local machine. And how does it help? Because this enables great flexibility. The third one is the development or the test or the debug of the application. When the developers or the administrators, they are working on an application on the VM in the cloud, they often need a set of tools and utilities. And copying such utilities and tools to each of the VM can be time-consuming exercise. See, there are multiple ways to do it. You can create containers which you can use for deployments. This is one of the other ways to do it, where you can quickly just copy paste all those dependencies and you're good to go. By mounting the Azure file share locally on the VMs as a drive, a developer or the administrator can quickly access their tools and utilities. Let us now look at the key benefits. One of them is the shared access. We know about the Azure file shares that it supports the SMB protocol, which means that you can get rid of your on-premises file share and you can use Azure file shares and you don't have to worry about the compatibility related issues. And being able to share a file system is a significant advantage with the Azure files for the applications that needs to share the ability. The second one is that it is fully managed. What does it mean? So Azure file shares can be created without the need for you to manage the hardware or the operating systems or any of its underlying maintainability and other platform related middleware activities. You don't have to worry about patching the operating system with the critical security upgrades or replace the faulty hardware disks. The third one is scripting and tooling. The PowerShell commandlets and the Azure CLI, they can be used to create, mount, and manage the Azure file shares as part of the administration of Azure applications. You can create and manage Azure file shares using the Azure portal, and that is what we are going to do in our demo today. Although there is a possibility of creating the Azure file share and then mount it as a drive can be done completely using the PowerShell or the Azure CLI, but here in our demo we will be using Azure portal for easy understanding of how it is done step by step, and then that can be converted to the PowerShell commands stepwise. The fourth one is the resiliency. Azure files, they promise high availability, and replacing on-premises file share with Azure file shares, it means that you no longer have to wake up to deal with the local power outages or the network issues, although these power outages are not for all the regions. Then we have the familiar programmability. So applications running in Azure can access the data in the file share via the system input output API. So there are multiple different APIs you can work with. There are the file REST APIs and the system input output APIs and so on and so forth. Developers can therefore leverage their existing code and skills to migrate existing applications. In addition to the system input output APIs, you can use the Azure storage client libraries or the storage REST APIs. The sky is the limit. You can do whatever you want. It is time for us to now get into the demo and see it in action, how it is configured. So what we are going to do is we are going to first create a resource group. Once that is created, we are going to create a virtual network where we will be creating 3 subnets and one specific for the virtual network gateway, which is needed for configuring the Point-to-Site VPN, one for the storage account, and the other one which is default. So there will be 3 subnets. Once that is done, we are going to create a virtual network gateway using that particular gateway subnet. And after that is done, we are going to create a file share, which will be a storage account, and then we will create a file share and try to map that file share as a network drive on our local systems. Let's get started. We are now in our demo environment, and the first thing I'm going to create is the resource group, because that is the basis. We need to first create the resource group. So I'll click on plus and give it a name, which is ATCSL. And I'll choose the location as East US 2 and click on review and create. Once that is validated, I'll click on create. So that is quick process and it is done. As a next step, we are going to create the virtual network, One thing we are going to keep in mind is we are going to keep everything in the same location. We'll click on plus sign and then we will select the resource group which we just created, ATCSL. Give this virtual network a name, ATCSL, oops, that is a mistake, underscore vnet. Choose the region as East US 2. And then I'll click on IP addresses. So I'm good with the IP address, but I'm going to create 2 more subnets. The default is by default there, and I'm going to create one storage subnet. Give that an IP address of 10.0.1.0/24 and click on add. And then create another subnet, which is the gateway subnet. We will give this a name, gateway subnet, and an IP address range of 10.0.2.0/24/24. That's a mistake again. Let me remove that 4 and put 0. Yes, and that is taken. And once that is done, I'll click on add. So our creating of 3 subnets in the virtual network is done. And that's all we need to do. We'll click on review and create, and then finally click on create to commission the virtual network in our resource group. So this deployment is underway, and which is a quick process. It is done. And once it is done, I can go to that resource and validate that all the 3 subnets that we created have been created and they are shown. Next is what we are going to do is create the virtual network gateways. And that is required for creating the Point-to-Site VPN. So we will click on virtual network gateways. Once we are there, we will click on the plus sign. And then on the configurations page, we will give this virtual network gateway a name. So this is ATCSL_VNG for virtual network gateway. The region is East US 2. And from the virtual network, I'm going to choose the virtual network that we just created, which is ATCSL_VNet. The gateway subnet will be chosen for you. And then we are going to create a new virtual IP for this virtual network gateway. And I think I'm done. I'll click on review and create. Once validated, I'll click on create. This will take some time. So we will pause the video and we'll return back once the deployment is complete. It is done now. And what we can do is click on the point-to-site configuration, configure now, and then give the address pool. So this is one IP address pool which will be allocated to any resource connecting from on-prem to the virtual network. So one of the IP addresses from this pool will be allocated to that particular device. For the tunnel type, I'm going to keep it SSTP, although I can keep it as IKE-v2 and SSTP, but for our demo purposes, we'll keep it SSTP alone. We are going to give the root certificate details, and I've already created the root certificate. And if you want to see the actual process of creating the Point-to-Site VPN, although I have covered it completely here, but if you want to see it, you can view my other video specifically for the Azure Virtual Network, where I have taught how to create the Point-to-Site VPN and how to create the self-signed certificate. So I'm using the same self-signed certificate and I have given it a name. And once that is done, I have clicked on save. It will take a lot of time before this is configured. And once that is done, I'm going to download the VPN client. And this VPN client can be given to any resource who wishes to work outside of the corporate network and wishes to connect with your cloud. So he can connect to any internet and then use the virtual private network client to connect to your corporate network and then to your cloud. And this complete process has already been explained in my other video. So we have downloaded the VPN client here, but what I'm going to do before opening or installing it, we will be creating a storage account. For that, I'll type in storage account. I'll go there and click on the plus sign. We will select a resource group and then give the storage account a name, which is ATCSL storage. I think it is already taken, so let me append FS to this one. Yes, and that works. We will choose the location as East US 2, and from the account kind, we will choose storage V2 general purpose V2 and replication as LRS. From the networking tab, we are leave it as it is, but in the advanced tab, we are going to choose Azure Files, large file shares, because that is what our intent is, right? Once that is done, I'll click on review and create, and after that we'll click on create once the validation has passed. This again is going to take some time, so we will wait for it to be completed. So I'll pause the video and return back once the deployment of the storage account is complete. So now this is done. I'll go to the resource, and from here I can click on file shares and create one file share. I'll click on plus and then give a new file share name, which is ATCSL file share. I'll leave the quota as is. By default, the size is 100 TB. This is quick and done. If I click on it, it shows nothing. If I click on connect, here you will see the set of PowerShell commands. I can copy paste it and I can explain it to you what it does, but generally it is checking for the SMB protocol, whether the port 445 is open on your system or not, so that your system can access the file share without any problems using the SMB protocol. If you don't want to open the port 445 or it is not allowed, you can create a point-to-site VPN, and that is the objective. So point-to-site VPN has already been created. I'll copy this and put it inside the notepad. And now what we can do, once the point-to-site VPN has now been configured, let us now try to create the network drive. So here I have the drive Y. The drive Z was already taken because I was doing some experimentations with that, so that is already taken. So we will take on drive Y, and for the folder, what we are going to do is we are going to copy that complete file share UNC path and try to access that. So we can copy this path from here. Remember one thing, that we have not yet installed the VPN client and we are not yet connected to our corporate network. So ideally, it will not connect. It's just a way to show that it will only work when we are connected, and also we need a private endpoint. So we will click on finish. It will ask us for the username and password. The usernames are usually Azure followed by the file share name. So we'll copy the file share name from the notepad where we copy pasted the command, and that is the easy way to do it. So if you see here, the user is Azure ATCSL storage FS. So that is the file share storage account name, and that is what we are going to use here. And then we will also be using the password for it. And the password is the primary key. So we will go to access keys. And from here, I can copy key 1. And just so as to show you, if you go to the notepad, that is what is mentioned in the password. So we will copy it from here, or I can copy it from there as well. And then I can go to the drive mapping Windows security pop-up that came up. I'll give the password and I'll click on OK. It will give me an error that the network path was not found. Why? There are two reasons for it. First, we are not connected to the corporate network through our virtual private network client, that's the VPN client, and the second, we need a private endpoint. So if we click on the see details, it will say that the network path was not found. How do we resolve that? I already told you, right? One is to install the VPN client, and the second one is to create the private endpoint connection. This second step we are going to create first. So we will create a private endpoint. We will give it a name, which is the file share endpoint. The resource group is ATCSL. The location is going to be East US 2 as usual. Once that is done, we'll click on Next, which is the resource. We will keep the connection method to connect to Azure resource in my directory. The subscription is pay as you go. And the resource type is going to be Microsoft storage account, because that is what this private endpoint will connect to from my local machine. Okay. So that is why I have chosen Microsoft storage account. Once that is done, we'll choose the resource, and that resource is Azure Storage FS. And the target sub-resource will be the file, because that is what we are going to mount. Next is the configuration. Here we will leave it as it is. If you see, the subnet has automatically been chosen as storage subnet, which is 10.0.1.0 under the virtual network of ATCSL_VNet. If we scroll down, you will see the integrate with private DNS zone. We'll need to keep it as yes, and the private DNS zone will automatically be pre-filled for you. So no need to work on that. And that's almost all the settings that we need. So we will click on review and create. Once that is done, we'll click on create. The private endpoint is under deployment. So we will wait for some time. It's a quick process and it is done. What we now need is the network interface IP address. So here the IP address is 10.0.1.4, which is the private IP address. It can only be accessed if you are connected from the VPN client to this particular network. Now what we need to do is extract the VPN client that we downloaded earlier. We will extract it, and once extracted, we will click on generic first. It will have the root certificate for us. We need to double click it and install it. So the VPN client comes in a package with the root certificate, and that is what we need to install. So once that is done, I'll go back, and since my system is a 64-bit machine, I'll use the 64-bit installer, and I'll install the VPN client. Once that is done, I'll configure the VPN client to work with the cloud. So the VPN client has been installed, and I can see ATCSL_VNet in my settings. So I'll click on ATCSL_VNet and then click on the advanced options. Once I'm in there, I'll click on edit, and here this VPN type I will select as SSTP, because that is what I had selected there. From the type of sign-in info, I'll select certificate, and before I click submit, I'll scroll down and I'll click on remember by sign-in info, then click on save. For the proxy settings, I'll click on automatically detect settings and then click on apply. Once that is done, I'll go back, click on it again and connect. Click on connect again and allow, yes. Now that I'm connected to my cloud using the VPN client and it shows as connected, now what I can do is I can go to my Windows Explorer and click on the map network drive. I already have the IP address of the network interface card which I want to connect to, but I'll also have to give the file share name. So I'll type in slash and then copy paste the file share name. And this time it is not the storage account name, it is the file share name. Here I will use the same username and password which I was actually using previously. So the username is Azure/ATCSL storage FS and the password is the key 1. Since that was already selected, I saved a bit of my effort. I'll copy the username. I'll go back and paste the username as well. Click on remember my credentials and click on OK. What it will say is, it will say that it is attempting to connect to that particular IP address and the file share. And once it has been verified and validated, it will show as a network drive. And now it is done. If you see, it shows the network drive mapped successfully. Just so as to verify whether everything is correctly mapped, what I'll do is I'll create a folder inside my file share. I'll give this directory a name, which is the test directory for ATCSL, and click on OK. And once that is done, I'll go back to my Windows Explorer and see that directory is visible. Now what I'm going to do is try to upload a file and see if that is visible from within the file share. So I'll go to my particular folder and I'll copy one PowerPoint presentation, one that I just presented. I'll copy it, go back to my shared drive and paste it. I could have used the Storage Explorer, no doubt, but this is another way of doing it. If I click on the directory, I can see that particular PPTX which I just uploaded. I hope this is clear to you on how to do it stepwise. These steps can be converted to PowerShell commands or even the Azure CLI, and you can use it that way as well. So we are back to our presentation. What did we learn? We learned about Azure Files, and we also learned about why Azure Files is useful, what are the key benefits of it, and how we can mount an Azure file share using the Point-to-Site VPN as a drive so that we can easily copy paste, or we can upload, or we can sync our files with the Azure storage in the file share. I hope you found this video useful, and if you liked it, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel. And you can download the training material or this PowerPoint presentation from azuretraining.com. And you can follow me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @mstechtraining. And my LinkedIn URL is also there. You can follow me. You can ask me questions on YouTube or even on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to respond to you. Again, please subscribe to my channel and give a thumbs up if you like it. Thank you, and keep exploring the cloud.